Cree Gap Bundalo. Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and welcome to the library. We're coming to you today with yet another in our series of Robert E. Howard Battle Royales. And today we're doing Battle Royale number 24. We are getting right up there in the number sequence here. We are getting awfully close, really close, to Battle Royale number 25, which is the big one for us on the channel here. We've been playing this one for a while. Today, though, we're doing the Pool of the Black One. Now, I can't really say it's a Battle Royale without putting an asterisk right beside that right now. There's only been one comic adaptation of Robert E. Howard's The Pool of the Black One. And that was in Savage Sword of Conan number 22 and 23. Now, what we're going to do today, because we do have tradition to keep up here on the channel, we're going to turn the camera around, we're going to sit down at the desk, because again, it's a busy day, I'm tired. We're going to sit, and we're going to walk through what happened in Robert E. Howard's written piece, The Pool of the Black One. It should be fairly quick, because it was a fairly succinct story. Then what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the Savage Sword adaptation, but we're not going to do a page by page. The reason we're not going to do this today is because sometimes people don't want the spoiler. All I'm going to do for you guys is tell you right now, it was actually a very good adaptation, but there were a few little things along the way that made you go, did that really happen in the actual? And I went back and checked, and no, they did not. So we're just going to jump to those panels and walk through those and what the differences were. Then we're going to come back and wrap the whole thing up, because there is no bajillion-dollar question. Obviously, if you want one of these, well, there is only one to pick. But we'll wrap up the video and explain what's going to happen in number 25 next. I think that's a good setting of the stage. Do we agree? We agree. All right, let's turn the camera around, get to the desk, and walk through what happened in Robert E. Howard's The Pool of the Black One. I see a ship in the harbor, I can in shallow bay, but if it wasn't for your misfortune, I'd be a heavenly person today. That's the actual lyrics to follow into that one. Welcome back to the desk. It is time to sit down and go through, well, what happened in the Robert E. Howard adaptation of this. Now, it's interesting. I just shot this entire segment once, and what I discovered when I went back to actually look at it was that I had misstated the name of the captain so many times because I can't read my own writing. We're going to do this again, and we're going to do it right this time. And some of you may notice when we get through the story why that intro song was so appropriate. Let's get into the story. Okay, this is actually a fairly quick Robert E. Howard story, and I will try to do this in a very truncated manner for you guys, because there are a lot of aspects to this story that are moving parts that are quite complex. But what Robert E. Howard did was he left us with those almost as onion layers to discover at our own pace. And I don't want to spoil all those, because some of you might want to read this on your own. So here's the broad brushstrokes of what happens in this one. It happens over there on the side of the map you guys can't even see in the shot here, but it happens off the Zingaran coast. There's a ship called the Wastrel, which is captained by a guy named Zaparavo. Not Zaparano, Zaparavo. And Zaparavo has captured a Cordovan young lady named Sancha. Now, Sancha is sunning herself on the deck, and she is a rather interesting character because she's been kidnapped by Zaparavo and being kept under his, well, basically as a slave, but as his woman. So she's been giving some of the benefits of leisure and what have you, and maybe she's getting rewarded with pillaged goods, but at the same time, Zaparavo is really a bit of a dick. I think we can say that fairly clearly. He's known as the Hawk in these waters. And Sancha is sunning herself on the deck, fully aware that the entire crew is watching her sun herself, and that her clothes are not really covering every aspect of her, but she doesn't really care. Interesting aspect about that. Anywho, and she hears a noise. Now they are well out to sea, and she sees Conan just climb over the side of the ship. I think everyone's taken somewhat aghast and surprised by this one, and the captain, Zaparavo, approaches Conan and says, "Who are you, and how did you get here?" He's like, "Well, I swam, and I'm Conan." And they're like, "What?" And a little bit more questions back and forth, and it comes to light that Conan is from the Baccaran's pirates. I have to be very careful with this one, because this is a group of pirates that live in an island chain off the coast of Zingar that prey upon Zingaran ships, whereas the Zingarans have their own freebooters, which prey upon basically everybody. but they cover that with the title of freebooting, so it's okay. These two groups of, we'll call both of them pirates, don't really get along because these guys are all Zingarans and they all get along, and these guys are from every race possible and they all get along, but together they don't. Conan explains that he had to leave the islands, and the reason why he did, well, they never get into it. But he had to leave quickly, he had to leave at night. So he stole a rowboat, and it was leaking like a sieve. And when he saw the sunlight and he saw the sails, he recognized the wastrel, which was the name of Zaporavo's ship. And he dropped his boat, because he said, well, I can go faster in the water, and swam there himself. Which is why everybody was so surprised. Like, oh, that's how you got here. And Zaporavo says, well, why are you here? What do you want? I don't have to take everybody on my ship. And Conan makes a point of, well, every ship could use a good sailor. Now, this is where Robert E. Howard writes a little bit into the story that is wonderful foreshadowing, but also deals a fair amount with fate. And this is one of those themes that comes throughout the story, and you'll see it pop up a couple times when you read it. In this one, Zaporavo takes too long in thinking. And in taking the time to think, he really signs his own doom. Perhaps if he had been more direct, more curt, had thought, maybe I'll just throw you back overboard, all of these things might have saved him, but none of them did. In fact, well, maybe at the end of the day, nobody would have survived, because, well, we'll see when we get through the story a little bit more. Zaporavo does hesitate, but he says, okay, Conan, you can come on my ship, but you're going to work. Oh boy, are you going to work, jerk. Now get down there with the rest of the men. And he turns his back on everybody, because this is one of the traits of Zaporavo. He sees everybody as being beneath him. And this is part of his final undoing. Conan heads down to the rest of the ship, knowing full well the freebooters are going to put him through this wonderful baiting exercise where they're going to haze him. And one of them walks up to him and swears at him and spits at him and calls him a dog because of where he comes from, that group of pirates that I mentioned earlier. And Conan doesn't think much and strikes out at him and punches him in the jaw, breaks his jaw, and breaks his neck in the same hit. Now, at this point in time, the rest of the pirate crew look over and say, oh my god, you killed him. And he makes a funny comment. He says, you freebooters are pretty light. And he says, back where I'm from, nobody would have even thought of that tap as being something worth talking about. And it pulls his sword and it says, are we done now? Or we're all friends now, right? Right? And everyone's like, oh yeah, it's all good. We're good. Let's just put the sword away, okay? We're good. Sancha has watched all this and is quite interested in Conan, but Zaporavo has missed all of this. Time passes, and during the time you have an allusion to Zaporavo really becoming more distant from the crew. And he's already been distant because he's a bit of, well, I said earlier, a dick. But he's been talking to Sancha about pages that he read from the Book of Skelos. He's been turning over old tomes, moldy maps, and he's mumbling to himself about treasure that's out there that's been hoarded by a race that predates man, and we're going to go find it. And Sancha's like, that sounds a little crazy. But at the same time, Sancha knows better than to second-guess Zaporavo, because that could be bad, and says, no, I will just go along with this, and I'll keep an eye on Conan. Because, there's nothing matter with that. Yeah, let's do that. Time passes and they do make their way to the island. The island that Zaporavo thought they would get to all along. And when they get there, Zaporavo, in a final act of cruelty towards Sancha, says, no, although you want to go on shore, you're staying right here. And Howard does make a point of showing that Zaporavo did that just as a final act of cruelty. And Sancha is used to these small micro and macro acts of cruelty from Zaporavo. The rest of the men row to shore. And when they get there, she sees them grouping around and just poking gently and exploratory testing into the jungle, which is just on the other side of the beach. But then once they decide, I guess there's no threat, they all just break off on their own and gather fruit and start eating. She can smell the fruit from the ship, and her mouth is watering, but she can't get the fruit because she's stuck on the ship. Which is cruel, because, scurvy in the Hyborian Age was a real thing. I mean, scurvy just doesn't exist just because it's the Hyborian Age. That is just being a dick. Anyway, she does watch Zaporavo at one point in time get into a bit of a tiff with his first mate. Because I guess he's decided he's wandering off into the jungle alone. First mate must have said something and got belted back. Conan, seeing this as the opportunity, goes. Now this is an interesting aspect of Conan. We have not seen Conan be this cutthroat before, without cause. Now, Conan has been waiting for Zaporavo to be alone. Conan knows that if he kills Zaporavo on the ship, the rest of the crew would kill him. But if he kills Zaporavo on his own, the crew don't know. Well, nobody will hold it against him, will they? So he does follow Zaporavo. Zaporavo finds himself in a clearing, turns to see Conan, says, are you following me? And Conan's line is, are you mad to even ask? And they have a sword fight. And Zaporavo, being a phenomenal swordsperson and known all throughout the coastlines here as being a great fighter, is nothing compared to basically taking something between a bear and a tiger and giving it a sword. It's not going to work. So he does get gored, not gored with a horn, but actually stabbed through the chest and through the heart, actually, by Conan. And this is where Conan sees a creature, a black one, as they called him, a giant monstrosity of a pre-human being, carrying something white over his shoulder, wandering off. Now, although his superstitious sense is going like crazy, he's curious. He's going to follow that thing. We cut scene now. Now, we come back to Sancha. We come back to Sancha for a reason, because we're going to develop this character more. Sancha's sitting on the shore watching Zaporavo and Conan go off into the bush, and she's thinking, where are they going? Why haven't they come back? What's going on? I want fruit. This sucks. She says, forget it. Strips down completely naked, climbs off the ship, and swims to shore. Now, this is one of those things where you got to sort of ask yourself, really, was that a good idea? Because if she got to shore, and the rest of the crew have been watching her on deck, and leering for quite some time, and suddenly she's there naked, and there's no Zaporavo or even Conan around, how are things going to go for her? Well, to her benefit, the crew are completely unconscious. They're not responsive. And she sees them sleeping, all of them holding on to these ridiculous fruit and smelling this sticky, sweet smell. And she's like, no, I'm not getting this fruit. I'm going to follow and see what's going on over here. Goes off into the woods and does follow the trail and does find the body of Zaporavo. Assumes that Conan has done exactly what she thought Conan would do. And turns because she hears a rustling. As she wanders over, she sees, well, not Conan, but another one of the creatures. Creature jumps up, grabs her, she screams. Cut scene. Back to Conan, who has now followed the creature all the way to a city. Now, the city isn't made by humans. It's got some sort of semblance of logic to it, but not as a human would think of logic. There's semicircular courts all over the place, surrounding towers. They're connected by arches. But it blends so well into the foliage, you'd never know it was there, unless you were literally right in front of it. Conan follows them in. It follows them through the archways. And he does see a way to climb up some stairs so he can get a vantage point, because he sees them go into a different courtroom. And he goes up and he looks down from this parapet and he sees this is the youngest crew member of the wastrel. He's now up. They're blowing onto a flute. At least one of them is. The big one that wears this gold band thing like a crown. He must be their leader. Conan doesn't hear any noise, but looks like this poor guy is just getting controlled. He looks like he's in pain. He's dancing, but in pain. This isn't good. And at the end of this dance, pipe goes down, or flute goes down, and the very one who is blowing into the flute picks the boy up and throws him into the pool. Then there's some rustling and murmuring, and Conan thinks they're going to turn around and look at him, so Conan hides himself behind the parapet again. When he looks back up, the boy is gone. That's not good. In fact, that's really not good. And the rest of them are meandering off. Conan then goes down to explore, to find out, well, where is the body? Obviously, they drowned him in the pool, but where is the body? Well, there is no body. But what's happened to him? He's turned into a little tiny statue about this big. It's on a ledge on the wall. And Conan looks and he sees hundreds of, I'm assuming it's hundreds. It's many of these statues along this ledge on the wall. And as he looks through them, he sees that they're so well done and they're so well preserved that he can make out each race and culture that he recognizes. But beyond a certain point in time, he assumes he's going back in time. He doesn't recognize any of these anymore. And this is where you get this wonderful piece of Howard going back into almost like a Lovecraftian type lore. How long have these creatures been preying on people coming to the island? Because these races and cultures are ones Conan doesn't recognize. You would think he would recognize even the precursors of the ones that he's seeing now, but they're not. Who are these guys? He turns to hear a scream and he sees Sancha being carried in, and he pounces and kills this creature. Well, Sancha and him are talking. Sancha brings him up to speed about what she's seen and why she followed him, and this creature attacked her. And Conan's like, okay, that's fine. But, this isn't good. We should probably get the men and get out of here. And as they're having this whole conversation, she hears a noise. He hears a noise. And he climbs up on top of one of the walls and looks out and sees the group of them coming back now. Each one of them, this is where you really get a sense of how many creatures there are, is carrying members of the crew, unconscious members of the crew. And other than the fact that they're just moaning every once in a while, you'd never know they were alive. And the one way at the back is carrying all their weapons, like a child would gather up all their toys. And he's like, oh, they're coming back. That's bad. Let's climb up the stairs and hide behind the parapet thing. And for the love of God, mum's the word, no words. They climb up there, and as they climb up, the rest of them arrive. And as they're looking over to try to see what's going on, they hear the loud clamor. They jump behind the parapet to hide because they don't know what it is. After some time, they look back out, and they see all of the creatures are hanging around the pool room again. And they're thinking, okay, they must be getting ready to have their little ceremony. That's fine. Let's climb down and see what's going on here. Where's the crew? And they see all the crew have been thrown on the ground on a sword in basically an adjacent chamber or courtyard. And Conan says to Sancho, okay, here's what we're going to do. I don't really have a plan, but the best choice we got here is let's wake these guys up, because they do seem to be wakeable. You work on that. Let's get them armed. I'll lead these guys on a goose chase, and that'll give you enough time to wake them up. And that way, at least we have a fighting chance, because we have a full crew fully armed. And she's like, well, I don't know if I can do that. And this is another interesting point where Howard really talks to a dark side of Conan, where Conan basically grabs her by the hair, right at the scalp, and says, you will do this. And basically shoves her off to do this while he takes off to go off and actually lead these creatures on a goose chase. Well, he runs into the room, kills 3 of them right off the bat because they've been caught off guard. And as he runs out the courtyard or the gate on the other side to go into what he assumes is a courtyard that will lead them on a merry goose chase, no. It's self-contained. He can't go anywhere. Well, there's a whole bunch of cat and mouse movement inside there, and at the end of the day, Conan's almost got his goose cooked when the crew suddenly wake up and they're fully armed. There is a massive slaughter. Now, I don't just mean a slaughter one way or the other. It's a slaughter always. Crew members are destroyed. The creatures are destroyed. At the end of this, there is one left being chased into the pool room where Sancho has taken refuge. And when he runs in there, another freebooter is behind him with a sword. The creature ticks up a sword off the ground, slashes down, cleaves the guy in the skull, if I remember correctly, but shatters the sword. Conan runs in the room and is about to attack. The creature screams and dives out over the pool, and at which point in time the rest of the crew are coming up behind Conan. A geyser shoots out, captures the creature in midair, and continues to go upward. The crew are all agog, looking at this going, what the hell do we do with this? And they're all saying, oh, we're going to drown when this thing blows up or falls back to the ground. And Conan's like, you're not going to drown. You're going to turn into a tiny piece of bone. We got to get out of here. He's got the wherewithal to start pulling everybody back. He's kicking them out, getting them to run. And as he's doing this, he's checking each court to make sure any living member of the crew is coming with him. Howard makes a big point of that. And as he does this, he's racing along with Sancho. They're looking back, and finally as they get to the first plateau on their way down the mountain, on the way back to the shore, they see the volcano, inverted volcano of green fluid behind them, explode and fall. They run thinking it'll dissipate, but as they look behind them, it's not dissipating. This thing is following them. So they run faster and farther, all the way down to shore, into the boats. Conan is carrying Sancha at this point in time because she can't keep up. He throws her into the bottom of the boat. They row like maniacs. When the water hits the shore, the green water hits the ocean water, they think, okay, we'll get a reprieve. No. It's still coming through the water. They row like maniacs to the wastrel. They get to the wastrel, they cut the anchor chain, throw out the sails, and they're starting to pull away. And just as they do, the green ribbon stops within 1 yard length of the actual ship. At this point in time, they know they're safe. This is behind them. Conan grabs Sancha, kisses her in typical Rico Suave Hyborian age fashion, because that's what he does. She says, how could you even think of this at a time like this? And he's like, well, that's the past. This is the now. They're dead. I'm alive. We have enough of a crew. They're going to have to work. They're happy. We're going to go out and get some more crew, and then we're going to go to the occupied shores, and we're going to raid absolutely everything. It'll be fantastic. Everybody smiles, and that's the end of the story. It's a really interesting and quick story. Conan basically gets onto a boat. The boat's already in some sort of mission. The mission gets itself into trouble. Conan makes his way out of it. They leave on the boat. Not that many aspects to it, but Robert E. Howard threw enough little onion layers in this to make you go, huh. My favorite one happens to be the number of statues that were along that ledge going back in time to make you wonder, how far back does this go? Another question, where did Zaporavo get those maps? How did he find out about these things? Like, that's an important one. Where did all this knowledge come from? How long have these creatures been preying on people? Why are they doing this thing with the pool? What's going on with that? Like, there's so many different aspects of this. You just don't know where to stop. But Howard was smart enough to say, no, small story, this is it. This is all I'm giving you. Really a well-done piece. All right. Now, as I promised in the intro, it's time to turn this thing around. We're going to point the camera down at the desk, this very desk, and we're just going to go through some of the snippets that I found within the story that was the comic adaptation that were slightly different. Then we'll come back and we'll wrap this whole one up. All right, let's get into the comic adaptation of this. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, we are not going to do the page by page in this one. Two reasons. One, I mentioned some people don't want the spoilers, and because this is an incumbent, we really don't need to go into that kind of detail here. We're just going to cover some of the differences that do occur. So, what did this come out in? Well, it came out in Savage Sword number 22, 23. They're right there for you. It's interesting. I mean, this one kind of matches the image we're going for. This one, not so much. But, yeah, it's the covers back in the day. But we're not going to read through the actual books. And I'll tell you, we'll show you guys what I actually read here. I read out of this. Now, this is the soft cover old back of these are really old. Dark Horse back in the day did these. Paperbacks on these, and I'll tell you, I read mine in here, and one of the things that you'll see in here is how low the quality of the reproduction is on this. Like, this is what I was reading here, and it was really difficult at times to read the white font inside these little black boxes. But what do you do? We're not going to read through that today. We are going to make life simple. I'll tell you how we're going to make life simple. We're going to break out the omnibus. This is the big boy, Savage Sword of Conan, a Heroic Signatures reissue of the omnibus number 2 with the cover image for issue number 16, which also has Worms of the Earth. We're going to talk about that in a subsequent video. Actually, I have plans for that. But as I mentioned, what we are going to talk about here are the differences that occurred between this comic adaptation and the Robert E. Howard version, the one that was produced in this. All right, so that's what we're going to walk through here. So, number one, the one thing that I pointed out when I was going through the story and I was talking to you guys about it was the fact that Sancha had chose to take off all her clothes and go and swim onto the island completely naked. Now, you might say, well, Tennessee Fats, how did they make that work in the comics? Well, I'll tell you how they made that work in the comics. They made that work in the comics by not having her be completely naked. And there's a very interesting panel they added in here. Okay, she'd feel freer if she could swim ashore naked as even. Now, there's a reason why they used that phrase, and we'll get back to that in a second. Whom some primitive races say was the first woman. But with Zaparavo gone, his men might not be able to resist temptation if she walked amongst them. Remember how I said, this could go negatively for her? Well, Roy Thomas wrote this little section in here. And the reason why I use naked as even was because in Robert E. Howard's story, when she stood on the side of the deck and dove into the water, she was naked as Eve. She spends the rest of it basically wearing this, we'll call it the equivalent of a bikini. Obviously, it's a way to get around limitations in what you could produce in a comic format. I could see it, but that is one difference. She should definitely be naked. Number two, next thing that was sort of off on this one. Remember how I mentioned when he gathered the men and he was getting them out, one of the things that Robert E. Howard wrote in was how sure he was and how he had cleared the way to ensure that all of his living men were gone. You don't get that here at all. In this, he's swearing at them, saying, get out of here, drown hell, will be turned into petrified bone. Get out, damn you. But that's it. We don't have any further dialogue here, basically walking through the fact that he was taking ownership of the men at that time and looking out for their well-being and getting them out of that place. He just kicked whoever was around him out the door to shove them along the way. So that's another small difference. I would call that a very small difference. The first one here being obviously a limitation in the actual product that you could produce in a comic. This one being, maybe it's a page count issue. I don't know why they chose to take that part out, especially when they were delicate enough to make sure they included the phrase naked as even in here. Yeah, it's a thing. All right, next one we got in here. This is a minor one as well, but it was one that sort of made me go, and scratch my head when I read it. When he was doing that whole dog and cat and mouse thing, when he was in that courtroom, at one point in time he was trapped and turned and ran to jump on a ledge and pull himself up. Now he already has a sword in his hand. And in the comic, what happens is, while they were waiting for him to attack, but they were standing back, he raised his sword up over his head as if he was going to attack, and then suddenly wheeled and ran to the wall and dove, and with his one hand he grabbed, and then the ledge broke loose. Here, he sticks the sword in his mouth. Now, this is a big sword. That's got a lot of weight. That's some really big pain on your teeth. That is what he's doing. Now, he does jump up and grabs with both hands, and it breaks and it falls down. And he falls flat on his back, just as he did in the story. No big difference there. But this one, really? Ow. Like, ow. And the last one in here really has to do with representation. You'll remember when I talked through the Robert E. Howard story and I said how Zaparavo had hesitated, how Robert E. Howard wrote in the point of foreshadowing, saying, if he could only see the future. let's go back to that. Here's the actual dialogue. A ship can always use another good sailor. Perhaps, and then ... But you'll work for your keep here. Get off the poop. And remember, there's only one, the only law here is my will. Now, this perhaps, ... I'm guessing this ... is supposed to represent the momentary thought, the hesitation that Howard drew out as much as he could within the written piece, but here it was sort of glossed over. And it's interesting, you would almost think that if you wanted to put in the foreshadowing, one of those little editorial boxes, like this one over here, would have been really good right here. But as I say, this is nitpicking points. These are minor things. Other than the not naked thing, I mean, everything else is just really about, well, how was it presented? Could it have been presented differently? Nothing really material. The story itself was bang on. It was basically the story, just in pictorial format. Yeah. Anyways, those are the only issues that I could come up with when I went through this. If any of you could think of any others who have read this, let me know. Put the postie down in the comments under, but, you know, all that tippity-tippities. All right, let's get the camera back around and wrap this bad boy up. Let's come back and wrap this bad boy up because, well, at the end of every video, you should have some form of wrap up. I tell you, I had to stop and get myself a drink of water because talking for 20 some odd minutes has actually reached that point with me where it's starting to wear on me. I don't know if this is an age thing or if it's just me losing the gift of gab. I certainly hope it isn't the latter of the two. All right, let's talk about what we did today and what we didn't do today. What we did do today was we walked through the Robert E. Howard story of The Pool of the Black One. And it's funny because I read the title of that story every time and I keep saying to myself, why isn't it The Pool of the Black Ones? There's multiple of them. Why is it one? I don't understand that. But minutia, let's move past that. It's a pretty cool Robert E. Howard story. I actually really enjoyed this tale. It's a nice one because it's got all sorts of different aspects to it with enough little threads in there for you if you're looking for sort of, you know, things to pull at, if you really want to guess at things. But it does succinctly come to an action-adventure sort of conclusion where everything is, well, good. Everybody wins. Well, except for Zapparavo. Poor guy. Anyways, but then we also went to the comic adaptation. Now, what we did not do is a page-by-page comparison of any sort of comic adaptations because there is only one comic adaptation of this one, and that is in this, Savage Sword Conan number 22 and Savage Sword Conan number 23. Now, that's the only adaptation that's out there. So what we did was we just walked through some of the areas where it differed. We didn't go through the whole story saying, well, this was similar, that was similar, that was, because there really were only 4 things that I could find which differed, which is typical for what we've seen for most Savage Sword adaptations of Robert E. Howard pieces. Roy Thomas did a fantastic job of putting these together and succinctly sticking to the actual script, sticking to the narrative. Like, you had one job, you did the one job. Like, that's pretty darned impressive. So, well done on that. But there were subtle differences. The one piece I actually think was strictly an editorial issue. And it's kind of interesting the way they got around it. And I'm not going to give them grief for it. Maybe someday there will be some comic adaptation of this that will come out, that will go full-blown Howard, where this is just her being complete. Because I think there is an aspect to the character that speaks to why she was naked. And I think that's another one of those rabbit holes you can go down in the Robert E. Howard story, but we didn't really do today. So there you go. That's it. The winner, by basically incumbency, is Savage Sword Conan number 22 and 23. That is the best comic adaptation of the Pool of the Black One, because it is the only comic adaptation of the Pool of the Black One. Well, that was sort of anticlimactic. Did you pick up on the Blue Monday and Ship in the Harbor? Whereas this was a story about a ship. It wasn't in a harbor, but okay, it's time for the wrap up. Now, we already went through the whole conclusion thing there because, well, it won. It's the one piece. But let's talk about the next steps here. Now, we still have to go on to the big one that I've been planning for quite some time on this channel, which is Battle Royale number 25, which is where we get to say, here's the succinct hits. Battle Royale number 1, we covered it, this is the winner. Battle Royale number 2, we covered it, this is the winner. That video is going to give you guys the goal that was this entire project, which is what are the best comic adaptations of all the Robert E. Howard stories that are in this book. So we're going to get into that video, and that's probably going to take us a little bit of time to put together, because there's a lot of going back and pulling books out to make sure we've got it all handy, because, well, we're going to want to showcase some books. Between now and then, are we going to throw out some other stuff? Maybe there might be other things along the way, but we'll get there. So that'll take us to the last Conan the Barbarian, Robert E. Howard Battle Royale. We're going to be doing the channel for really quite some time. But I'm not going to steal too much thunder from that. Let's save that all for Battle Royale number 25. Now everybody, that is our video for this week. I hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you in the next video.